Since this isn't overly formal, do you want to know who all is in the room? Would that help?
That would be great. I mean, it's your
No,
meeting,
that'd
but
be
I would love
great.
that. I
think
would love
We
that.
should absolutely do that because
Please.
you're new. So if you all want to introduce yourselves and what your jobs are. Karen, you should introduce yourself as well.
You know, Casey.
And yeah, you know Casey and Marty? Okay.
Yes.
And now you've met all of us, so.
Now I've met all of you, and I'm Hank Harris. And first of all, thank you for the honor of allowing myself and my firm, which is called Human Capital Enterprises. Can you hear okay in the mic? Am I doing all right?
That's better.
Better. Okay. To serve you. This is a very important body of work and a very important time in the history of your school district. And I know that there were several other firms that also expressed an interest in partnering with you, and we consider it really a great honor. When I say we, I will say we sometimes. I will primarily be your consultant, but we are a team of, depending on how you count, roughly 13 people, but mostly about 5 people that spend a lot of their time doing this work. So thank you, and it's great to get to know you and to kick off the work that we'll do together over the next few months. You should have an agenda, and you should have a timeline. And so that will kind of guide our work tonight, and very much this should be a back and forth. So we've put together a proposal for you as a response to your RFP that you've approved. And so we'll go through that. And there are some options and opportunities for you to shift things a little bit if you want, or to stay straight with what you have. Let's start with, I'm going to say the timeline, but I want the to be in quotes, because the timeline really is our draft timeline for you. It needs to work for you. You all need to be present. So we built a timeline that we think works with what you were expecting. But during this meeting, not right at this moment, but during this meeting, we're going to calendar and make sure that we have dates that work for all of you. Make sense? Sound good?
Yeah.
What I'd like to do is walk through the timeline hypothetically, as it were. So again, I don't want you to be married to the dates in there, but they may very well be the dates or something quite like it. But I'd like to walk through what the timeline looks like as a draft. And I would love to invite you to ask questions, to push, to probe. This is really your timeline and your project. It's not for me to come in with a canned thing and say, here's what we're doing. This is really a back and forth to make sure that this is something that works for you and your district and your community. The first thing seems to be probably good to go because that's where we are. We are having a planning meeting in open session tonight, January 16th. And board members, I think you all know that I get to meet with each of you tomorrow. That's what we call our board one-on-ones. We'll spend about a half hour each of you with me. I get to quiz you. I'm going to ask you about the state of the district. I'm going to ask you what your dreams and aspirations are, both for the district and for your next leader. That'll be tomorrow. We think it would be wise to include your community in asking some of those very questions. And I want to just talk briefly about what are the questions. So it's a precursor for what I'm going to ask you tomorrow. It's also a precursor for what we'll ask when we engage with the community, particularly in an online survey, is a few questions. What is great about the Port Angeles School District? What complexities and challenges will your next superintendent face? Every school district has them. Every superintendent faces them. Other than managing the operation, which is and of itself a significant body of work, what are the issues that you know this next leader will face, whether on the first day they come on board in July or September or over the course of the first year or two, or let's hope this person is here for 5 or 7 years. What do you know? What do you expect that they will have to grapple with, bring people together, help steward, engage with partners to solve? So those are the questions that will guide our conversations tomorrow. They will also guide the online survey. I didn't put an end date in that online survey, but it'll probably run about a week. In a search that might have started in the spring, I'm sorry, excuse me, in a search that might have started in the fall, if we were starting in September and October, we would do a lot of this legwork before we opened the recruiting process, before we opened the window that invited people to apply. However, once we get into January, February, March, we don't want to wait to open the recruitment window. We want to get that window open, even though we're still doing some of the engagement processes. Bear with me. So in the initial timeline, I think in the proposal, it said January 22nd, which is midweek next week. And I actually want to get a little more ambitious, and I want to open the window on the 19th, which I believe is Sunday. Sunday's actually a good day to open a search. Sunday's a day that a lot of people read their emails, and we do a lot of email communication out when we open. You might have seen in the proposal, we have it's not the only way we reach people, but it is one of the significant ways that we reach prospects is through our listserv, which has a readership of about 40,000. And as you might imagine, school leaders who are super busy during the week sometimes have a little bit more time to look at emails that are not the urgent kind that are coming in the middle of the week, right? So we get close, these days we get close to 50% readership. So that's 20,000 people who will, primarily education stakeholders, regional and national. And so Sunday's a good day to do that. So what I'd like to do is open your window, your recruiting window this coming Sunday, and keep it open till February 12th, which is short of a month, but close to a month. And while that window is open, we are still engaging. We are still, meaning I am still learning your district, and we are still doing some of the setup work, board and consultant. And a key piece of that work is on this calendar is the draft date would be the week of January 27th. Before we end tonight, I'd like to actually identify a date when this would happen. Is that I would come to you sometime during the week of the 27th of January, and I would say to you, board, based on what I've learned, and primarily my input is the online survey, and so we're going to work with Casey and the team here to get that out to internal and external stakeholders, right? Your staff, your families, your parents, your community members who might not have kids in the district, but they're the taxpayers, right? We want to get as many voices in there through that survey, and also potentially through some other conversations that we'll talk about. And that week of January 27th, excuse me, I will come to you, probably virtually, and say, board, here is what I am learning. Here's what I've learned that I believe are the key qualifications and criteria that I'm hearing your community say they want you to focus on in the next superintendent. I think, I'm sorry, you know what, I want to go back to the online survey, and I don't think I covered the 3 questions that I wanted to. I want to just dial back in time for a moment. Hold that thought where we are. Right now, we're at the presentation of the next superintendent. I'm going to just dial back to the online survey and to the one-on-ones because I don't think I was comprehensive in what I said. So in those conversations, in the survey, there's 3 questions that I want to ask. I think I talked about what's great about the Port Angeles School District and what's the complexities are. I don't think I mentioned the 3rd question, which is, what are the qualifications and criteria that you would want to see in your next superintendent? I'm going to ask you, board members, but I'm going to also ask folks who are not board members, and I'm going to say, if you were a board member, if you were the decision maker for this search, what would you be looking for in terms of your candidates? Okay, so to repeat, really 3 questions are going to guide this. What's great about Port Angeles? What are the complexities and challenges the next superintendent will face? And what are the qualities and qualifications and characteristics that you would be looking for in your next superintendent? Okay, thank you for letting me talk out of turn. So now I'm coming back to the presentation of the next superintendent criteria. And that 3rd question in particular, the question about what are the dreams and aspirations, what are the qualities and criteria that you would want in your next superintendent, that question in particular informs this document that I'll bring to you. You with me, board?
Yep.
I'm going to pause because I tend to talk fast. And you're all super, what's that?
We listen pretty fast, too.
Yeah.
I know that about you from watching your board meetings. But let me take a moment. Is there anything that I should clear up or?
So I have 2 questions. Well, I only wrote down the 2 questions. So you have what's great about Port Angeles and what qualities?
That's question 1 and 3. So the middle question is what are the challenges and complexities that will await the new superintendent? Thank you, Casey. Board, other questions, or should I keep going? Go on? Okay. Okay, so we'll talk about that typically in a work session. You might tweak that document, because what I'll be clear about when I engage with folks is that as a board, you're going to want to be informed by your community, and you're the decision makers. You're the electeds. It's your call. And so whatever that criteria is that I bring to you has to reflect the collective wisdom of the 5 of you. So you might add some things, or you might take some things away, or you might tweak things. And that is your prerogative as the elected officials. Meanwhile, so it's the week of the 27th, and now we have our criteria. The recruitment window is already open. And to the extent that I'm engaging with candidates who might be interested in Port Angeles, I'm also going to be saying, okay, and during the week of the 27th, the board is going to come out with what are they looking for? So pay attention to that, because that might help you decide you're in, and it might make you think maybe you're not in. And watch the board meeting if that happens to be live streamed. That's also very useful for candidates to think about whether this might be the right match for them. Okay, so now we have the criteria, and now the window is closing on February 12th. So on February 12th it closes. On February 13th, which is not written down here, and doesn't need to be, but on February 13th, I'm going to be jumping into reviewing those applications. And I'm also going to be sending to the 5 of you a link to the applications as well, so that you also are viewing the applications. And you will also not in here, because this isn't really the official part. This is individual work that each of you will do as a board member. You will want to block out some personal time for yourselves to review the applications. My job as a consultant is to help you a little bit, but I'm not the decision maker, right? So one of the things that I will do when I share those applications with you is I will have pre-screened the applications. And I'll say, board, based on my reading of the applications and based on the criteria you've established, in my humble opinion, let's say you have 25 applications. In my humble opinion, these 13 are most worthy of your time. These 12 may be less so. You may pay attention or not pay attention to my humble opinion. You are the decision makers. So some of you will say, okay, Hank, we're hiring you for a reason. I'm good with that. I'm going to read 13. And some of you will say, I'm going to read all 25 of them, and that's your prerogative. And at the end of the day, you as a board get to decide who to invite for your first round interviews.
What's the highest number of applications you've gotten?
In history, I would say somewhere in the 40 to 50 range.
I'm not thinking we're going to meet that. I was just curious.
And that might have been a few years ago too. The thing about that is there's also people that will apply. I don't know if they'll be watching tonight, but there will be people that will apply to every single job I've ever posted. So there are some. Now, maybe one of those people is your next superintendent, but my guess is, if I had a bet, probably not. So what I want there to be a high number of really strong candidates. And I would say in a district like Port Angeles, I would expect that you're getting between 6 and 10 really strong candidates. And I think that's actually a really good number, especially in this day and age and the challenges that superintendents face. Thank you for that question, yeah. So February 12th, the window closes, and on February 18th, so one of the questions I'm going to be asking as we calendar is, do you have time between the 12th and 18th to do 6-7 hours of reading on your own time? And I see some nods, so that's great. President Methner, should I wait? See if you've got time during those days?
It's President's Day on the 17th, so, but other than that.
Yeah, so that's, did I, yeah,
It's not me. Oh, wait.
No, that's a really good point. So in my proposal, I wrote the 17th, and then I
I'm wide
think my friend Casey maybe pointed out to me, that is President's Day, so let's do a different day. So let's come back to whether the 18th is a good day or not. If it is, let's do it, and if it's not, we'll find another day. And at that meeting, though, is when, in executive session, that would be an executive session meeting, we would sit and deliberate around the candidates. There is law in Washington State around what we can and can't do in executive session. I'm sure you know that. And the way that works with respect to superintendent searches and selection is that we would meet in executive session. You would converse, you would discuss, you would not make any, of course, make any decisions in executive session. We'd come out of executive session that very night. We'd go into open session, and you would select your first round interviews using letter proxies, and that's very standard practice in Washington, D.C. I said Washington, D.C. I meant to say Washington State. I lived in D.C. for 6 years. I don't know why that came into my head. So what that would look like is Mary might make a motion, and we'll talk about this in more detail, but just so the public knows as well, Mary would make a motion. No, Chair.
So you're saying from the 12th to the 18th, we will have access to those applications, but then you're going to present us the slate of the ones you think we,
You're gonna, so yeah, let me say that, let's say the 13th to the 18th, you're gonna have access to all the applications. And when you,
we'll know at that point which ones you think are the
yeah,
go-tos? Okay.
right. And that's really just so that you can decide where you want to invest your energy in reading. But I always want to be clear that it is completely your decision. And I won't have my feelings hurt if you say, you know what, Hank, thanks, but this other candidate that you didn't pick, we're actually really interested in this person. That's completely fine. That's your discretion. So in that slate meeting, you'll deliberate, and then in public session immediately following that slate meeting, you will move forward candidates that you will know who they are, but in public, you will refer to them by proxy letter proxy. And again, that's very standard in how we do it in Washington State. That's February 18th. That's a mere month or so from now. So this is a fast-moving search, as you've asked. Assuming it's February 18th, again, we're using dates as hypotheticals, but assuming it's February 18th, we're going to turn around really quickly and have interviews shortly thereafter. And if the board said yes to February 22nd, that would be the date. Now let's talk about that. There's not a lot of time between February 18th and February 22nd. So one of the commitments I make is that when I post that job all the way back on January 19th, because we're going to make some decisions tonight, all those candidates who apply, they're going to know that if they have a first round interview, it's February 22nd. I'm not going to surprise people on February 19th and say, oh, hey, guess what? What are you doing on the 22nd? They're going to already know that if they are fortunate enough to interview with you, it's on the 22nd. So we're not going to run into any difficulties there. And I strongly recommend, and this is almost in every search right now, that first round interview is virtual. It just makes a ton of sense. It's easier to do. You're not meeting them in person. The turnaround obviously is much easier and certainly much more affordable than paying people travel expenses with 3 days' notice. So they'll know it's going to be the 22nd. They'll hold it in abeyance, if that's the right word. I will call them on the 19th and say, guess what? They want to interview on the 22nd, and we'll set up the interviews.
So Saturday works to do it.
That is a question. That's what the date. Yeah, if you're good with it, let's do it. If you say no, we don't want to do that, we'll pick another date. But we often do Saturdays also.
It's the same day as the JFFA event. So I don't know if which starts at 5.
Right, so we'd have to get them out of the way before that.
Correct.
I don't have time to put our fancy clothes.
Close on.
Our Chamber of Commerce, no,
Okay.
not
The JFFA. Wanda Fuca
yeah,
Arts, or JFA,
Pick a Festival of the Arts.
a foundation.
Yeah,
Is on that Saturday?
Yes.
yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay, so that might not be the best day then.
I don't know what group you're talking about right now.
Wanda Fuca Festival.
Yeah, I don't have anything
Okay.
planned for then. That's a night event, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we're fine.
We are fine. That is, however, I will say that day, the first round interviews is your longest day in the process. It's longer than your finalist interviews.
Yeah.
So we do want to find a day that, so I'm doing in another district, I'm doing one this coming Saturday. We're starting at 8 a.m., we're ending at 7 p.m. So you want to keep a day that you can really block out But let's come back to that in a moment
Okay.
and make sure that we have a date that works. I know, it's a long day. It's very adrenaline. You get lots of breaks. It's a good day, though, too. You feel really charged up, even after 9 or 10 hours. Okay, so again, we're going to just hypothetically say the 22nd, even though it might not be the 22nd. The 22nd, let's use those hypothetical numbers. Let's say we talked earlier about, let's say 25 folks apply. And let's say on my recommended slate, I think you might want to look more closely at these 13 and maybe less closely at these 12, but you can do as you will. And let's say you come out of that slate meeting, I'm going back in time again. Let's say you come out of that slate meeting on February 18th and say, we want to interview 5 candidates. I think that's a reasonable number, 5 or 6. So 5 or 6 numbers you have now engaged, it's now February 22nd, hypothetically it's February 22nd, and you've interviewed, let's say, 5 candidates virtually. And at the end of the day on February 22nd, you as a board, you've completed 5 interviews, you are going to identify your finalists. And you're going to do that in the same way that we talked about earlier. You're going to come out of that meeting, you're going to go into open session, and Mary is going to say, I nominate candidate D, and Stan's going to say, I nominate candidate E. And we can have that discussion in open session just in order to maintain the dignity of the candidates in the process. We refer to them by name. In that open session, let's say 3 names are moved forward as finalists. So it's February 22nd, and we now have 3 candidates named. Casey, there is a communications impact here too, right? Like your community is expecting to have some information. You can give some information. You can't give, well, you can give all the information that you're privy to. You wouldn't be privy to the names, but you'd be privy to everything else, and you'd be talking about process and explaining how it goes. And I think you said did you already put something on the website, I think, with the superintendent search?
It's not up yet, but it's
Almost ready to go.
it's there.
Yeah, that's really key. Your community, this is high stakes, right? And your community wants to know what's going on, and we want to be as transparent as we possibly can. So, and you and I can have conversations along the way, but it seems like you're already getting started with making sure the community has what they need to be able to stay engaged with this process. So in this plan, in this model, on February 22nd, I am calling I'm calling all 5 candidates that interviewed with you, and 3 of them are getting the good news phone call that congratulations, you're one of the finalists for the Port Angeles School District. Congratulations, you're one of the finalists for the Port Angeles School District. We expect you to see you in Port Angeles in about a week's time. Now, by the way, there's one error on this timeline. I apologize. Again, I know we're only in draft, but it says February 28th or March 1st, and I would like you to cross that out. What I would like it to say is February 27th and or February 28th. Now, and I actually think if you can, 2 days are better than 1. If you have 3 finalists, it's really hard to do 3 finalist interviews in 1 day. It's nice to be able to do 2 in 1 day, the 3rd the next day, and then the deliberation in the afternoon of the second day. So 2 full days. They're not quite as long as that day I told you before, but they're 2 days, work days, like maybe 9 to 5 or something like that, or maybe 12 to 7 or something like that. Let me pause. Questions so far?
So that would be the day that folks would come in, probably, I don't know how we did it in the past, like we'd take them to lunch and then to one of the schools and then another.
I'm
group
glad
of
you
us-
asked that question.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I did take the liberty of listening to your board meeting when you actually discussed the process. And what I heard, I believe it might have been Dr. Long, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you were talking about, I think you had heard about a process where names were not revealed publicly of finalists. So that's something that we should talk about right now, because that's not how you've done it in the past. And it is a strong recommendation. I can do it both ways. It is a recommendation in order to get, there's a few reasons I could explain to you if we could talk about it, but probably the primary reason that I think it is in the best interest of boards these days to not publicly reveal the names of finalists is that a growing number of candidates, particularly a growing number of sitting superintendents, aren't willing to do that anymore. It's too fraught with their current school district to have their names out in the press, and then they don't get the job and they have to go back to their home district, which now knows they'd rather be in Port Angeles. So I want to make sure that the board has an opportunity to think about that or talk about that or engage about whether that's something that you're comfortable doing. If you were to say, no, we really feel like we need to reveal the names of the finalists, we can do that. It probably would extend your search a bit because there's a lot of work that goes into creating those structures for the public events. But why don't I allow you to discuss with each other, or ask me questions, or reflect on whether that's a process you feel comfortable with this time
So by
around.
keeping them as A, B, and C, we wouldn't be taking them to the schools. We wouldn't be taking them to lunch.
You are correct.
They're not interviewing the district so much.
They're interviewing the board.
They're with the board, but they don't know the,
That is correct. And there are some caveats that we could insert in there to give a little bit more of engagement, and I can talk about that. These two would be probably extending your timeline a little. I know you know that you have a very ambitious timeline to get from here to the end within 2 months, which I am totally prepared to meet. But if we were to add some of those other pieces, it might make sense to, we'll probably need to extend out a bit, and there probably is a little bit more cost that goes into some of those things. But I want you to be comfortable with your plan. So let's talk about that if that's something that you would want to see.
So that day, the day of the, where are we? We're in,
27th, 28th.
okay, 27th and 28th, okay. Let's say we get it down to 3 or even 2. How are we going to know, do we ever talk to their people that know them?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
When do we do that?
Absolutely. So what happens, so let's dial back to February 22nd, which is the date that you have completed your first round interviews and you have identified your 3 finalists. There's a lot of work that starts to happen that night. So let me spell that out. So I call a candidate and I say, Candidate X, congratulations, you were one of the 3 finalists for Port Angeles. Can you tell me who the other 2 people are? No, I can't do that. There's a number of things that we want to do at this moment in time. Number 1, if you don't live in Port Angeles or nearby, you might need to get an airplane ticket. So recognizing board, that's a bit of a cost, especially with a short timeline. So you got to be ready for that if you're okay with this model, because they'll have about 5 days to get a ticket out here. Now, you might certainly have local interest. I would expect you would too, but there is the possibility somebody might need to fly in. That's one of the things you're going to do. Number 2, we're going to call this person, so I have a name, Pat. Is there a Pat in the room?
Nope.
Excellent. Okay. So we're going to call this person Pat. So Pat, in addition to that, there are 6 people from your from your current school district and from your previous school district that I want the board to be able to conduct reference checks with. And Pat's gonna say, you mean the 6 people that I put on my resume? No, not necessarily those people. I actually want to talk to your CFO from your current district, your director of special ed from your current school district, your executive assistant, your union president, and then in your last district, I want to talk to your superintendent and your chief business official. Oh, okay. So Pat, what I want you to do out of a courtesy is I want you to contact each of those people, tell them that a board member from Port Angeles is going to call them. And then, can you do that in a day? Yeah, I think I can. And then I want their email and their cell phone number. Okay? Well, I thought there was a confidential process. Yes, it is. And so what I would like you to do when you call these 6 people is explain to them that we are really trying to maintain a very confidential process. Would you please, when you talk to them, would you please maintain the confidentiality so that this is just a quiet phone call between a board member and yourself? The board is not interested in this being a public event, naming everybody in the press. People honor that. People respect that. People are willing to do that. Even if it's not my closest colleague of all time, right? If somebody calls me and says, Hank, will you take a phone call? I'm going to say yes. Will you not talk about it to everybody? I'm going to say yes. People tend to be honorable, I think, and in our industry, I think in particular they do. So I don't worry about that. And candidates, once I have this conversation, typically feel okay with that. I'm going to come to you. This is all going to move quickly, and I'm going to say, okay, board, we have 3 finalists, and each finalist I have 6 names. And remember I said to you that with Pat, it's their CFO and their Director of Special Ed and Exec. With the next candidate, I'm going to try to have the exact same roles to the best of my ability. I want to talk to your executive assistant and your CFO and your whatever and your last, so that when Stan makes his phone calls, and I'm going to ask Stan if he's willing to make 3 phone calls, and if Stan says yes, and Stan, you can say no, but I'm hoping you'll say yes. If you say yes, I'm going to give you 3 CFOs of the 3 finalists. And that way you're getting a little bit of an apples to apples. Does that make sense? Yep. You're going to ask the same questions to 3 CFOs who all have a similar lens on the body of work. And so that's a big, when you take those 3 reference checks times, I know there's 5 of you, but maybe one of you will take 2. So we have 6 times, that's a lot of information. I'll present you with the form, I'll present you with the questions, I'll instruct you how to do that, you take notes, you bring it, we're all gonna look at that material. Yeah, absolutely.
We have because we don't want to ask this guy and then we get, then we get off to talking about.
No,
your
right,
skiing.
exactly. If you're gonna talk about skiing, you can do that at the end of the conversation.
Have the same
I've got your
criteria
12,
as-
exactly.
Okay, good.
We've got it, and we want it to be equivalent and fair and
Right.
equal among, so that we're all looking at the same data. In addition to that, I'm going to encourage you to engage in an investigative background check on your finalists. I think that's really important. That's not me. I'm not an investigator. So you saw in the contract that there was an option to do that. And I would strongly recommend, I mean, they're not cheap, but I think that in this day and age, it's really important that your prospective superintendents do go through a background check through an investigator. So you're going to have that information. You're going to have the reference check information. You're going to have all the information that's come to you from the first 2 interviews.
So is that
I would like
investigative
to-
report something we can contract for you to do?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I would like to back up and just weigh in on if we want to have confidential the names, and I definitely do want it to be confidential so that no one pulls themselves out because we're checking that. So I just wanted to weigh in on that. I feel strongly about keeping confidentiality of the people until we have opportunities to go through some of these steps.
I totally agree with that.
I agree.
Me too.
Great. Well, I salute you for that. I know sometimes that's not an easy decision for a board.
Kirsten,
so-
do you feel that way?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
100%. It makes a lot of sense to me,
Yeah.
and we talked about it, Scott and Hank and I talked about it, so I feel really good about it.
Perfect.
Okay, so if that's how then it goes, and I appreciate that, board, and that also allows you, I think, to keep to your fairly ambitious timeline. I don't mean to say ambitious as though that's not a good thing. I mean, you've got an ambitious timeline. Let's meet it, but that, I think, allows us to get there. Then if you are engaged in interviews, final interviews on the 27th and 28th, for example, and at the end of the day on the 28th, you convene and you narrow down the candidate. Again, we'll do kind of a similar process, and you're likely to land on a lead finalist coming out of that work. You may not have your investigative background checks complete at that time, so we're going to have to. It often takes about a week and a half. So we might just sort of be in stasis for a couple of days. But shortly thereafter that, you will want to begin contract negotiations with a lead person. Try and turn that around in a couple of days if you can, and have a public announcement right around March 7th if you can. The public announcement is an open session meeting where somebody is making a motion to the open session meeting has a contract that's been negotiated as the document for the meeting. And it has everything that's in that contract except the name of the candidate. And then when you come to the open session meeting, somebody makes the motion. I would like to move that we award this contract to Pat as our next superintendent. You vote, you discuss, you talk. Typically at that time, we would expect that it would be an affirmative vote. We might even have Pat in the audience. And that is the conclusion of your superintendent search. What have I left out? What are you wondering? How does that feel?
When do you write the contract? Where does that come in?
It's not written per se in the timeline, but it's in between March 4th and that selection announcement. So I mean, if you make a decision on the 4th, it's possible that you could have that contract written and have an open meeting by March 7th. You could. It might be a few days after that.
How much do you help us with that negotiation?
Typically not a lot. I will point you to where you might go in terms of, but I generally ask you to work with so sometimes boards already have a template that they want to work off, whether that came from WASDA or whether that came from their general counsel or whether that's their current superintendent's contract, if you're comfortable with that. So I would help you figure out which of those. Usually within the board, there's 2 individuals, oftentimes the president being one of those individuals. Doesn't have to be, but oftentimes it is. And the 2 of you are working on crafting that contract, and then working with the candidate. Sometimes the candidate wants to be represented, sometimes they don't care, and I think we should honor whatever they want. You want to engage your general counsel at least at some point. Maybe they're at the table, maybe they're not. That's how that works.
So that is we have already decided that is their contract.
By the time of the open session, there should be a contract that's ready to be signed. You have not officially decided until you vote, of course, in public session, but you have it there waiting, presuming that candidate might get an affirmative vote.
I'm scared now.
No, how did I scare you? That wasn't my
No,
intent.
it's just, this is a big decision.
It's a big decision.
Yes.
It's a big decision.
Is it better to have one person do the calls for the background check or multiple board members to do that?
It's a really great question. I could see an argument for one person doing it. It's a lot of calls, right? I could see an argument for one person doing it. And if one person were willing to take that on, because that person's going to be consistent in exactly how they ask the questions, right? I mean, we're all a little different. We're all going to add our own little flavors to it. In a perfect world, if one person could do 18, and that would probably be good. The counter argument is there is also value in each board member hearing the voices of the people that have worked with them. I don't want to discount that. I think both models are fine. I've never had one board member say, I'll do them all, because that's a big body of work. But I could certainly support that. What's your thought, Mary?
Well, I'm interested in that work, and I've done that work
Yes.
before. But I do think there is validity in having other people hear that process on the board to be able to hear what is being said. So perhaps we can find a happy medium compromise in there so that one person isn't doing, say, 28. That would be a great deal of work. And then people also have the opportunity to hear the responses and the information, and that may bring them to a conclusion about who they think is the best candidate. So I wouldn't want that to not be an opportunity for some of the board.
So are you picturing we could sit around a table and listen to those conversations on speakerphone, or do you just
I
think
wasn't thinking of that,
have
but-
2 people do it together, and so both can hear? Or
Yeah, that's a good option too.
Or another option might be that if you're the one, you're doing 20 or 22, I don't know what the math is, and each other person is doing 1 so that they have some sense. Was that? I think there's lots of ways we could mix that up.
Thank you. Okay, we can still think about that one,
Yeah.
but I think it is an important one for people to have that opportunity if they want to have it, so that they can hear. I think that would be an enlightening piece for the board members.
would we, since this is all information about our only employee that we have, do we do all this in executive session?
You don't do all of it, but for instance, the presentation of the criteria would be open session.
Right.
The interviews themselves would be an executive session.
Okay.
The deliberation about who to move forward with letter proxies is always an open
Yeah.
session.
So the interviews, the first round is online, Zoom. And then our second, where we're down to maybe 3, that's in person. Okay. And then so they would make, let's say that one of them is from Topeka. They would make their own flight arrangements, but would we be responsible for making sure they had a place to stay? I don't necessarily, I'm not a huge fan of people having to make their own hotel reservations in a town that they don't know, because in this town, it can go south real fast.
So that would be important for me to know. So is it typical? It's typical they make their own reservations, and it's typical that the one piece I do is make sure candidates don't stay at the same hotel. But
Okay, well, we have some lovely hotels, it's not that, but there, we also have one that may come
Yeah,
out as
yeah.
a common name. People might be like, oh, it's, you know.
yeah, so without naming names, what I think I would do is I would engage with you or a member of your team and make sure that I can recommend to the finalists, pick from these.
Yeah.
Would that,
That's fine.
yeah,
Yeah, easy.
yeah, okay. There's a few other things I want to talk about, but I want to make sure that I mean, you might very well have more questions about kind of what we just talked. We've talked about a lot. What else is on your mind?
I don't think I have anything else, but it did go fast and there was a lot, so we can ask for clarification at the end of this evening if we need to.
Oh, absolutely.
One last time.
Well, it's not one last time too, right? We're gonna spend some good time together, so we'll go over this a few more times too. In terms of designing, however, I want to make sure that we hit on things that, because tonight we're going to calendar. So, so Mary, is there anything you want me to go back over?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'd like to move forward. but
Okay.
I may have questions.
Please, yeah,
again.
don't hesitate.
No, we need you to have questions.
So, I beg your pardon, my files are in 2 completely different locations on my computer, and I'm sorry, so, bear with me one moment, I want to pull up the
When you
agenda.
were an HR director, did you ever go through a superintendent search?
Do you want me to
as the
pull it up
HR?
on the TV screen?
I think I'm good, thank you, Casey.
And I often have people.
And do
call
we
me
have a hard stop for this meeting, end time?
They
I mean,
call
we're not
to
gonna go all night, I just want to know if I,
about a
okay.
candidate that they're
Um,
considering, so I've had a lot of
So
conversations.
before we calendar, I want to actually jump down to item number 5 on your agenda for a moment. So I know that there is a high value in a super efficient use of your dollars for this process, right? The search, the base fee is $19,000. I want to talk about some of the other things that you're likely to expend money on, so you can have a sense of where the wiggle room is, what you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with. So beyond the base fee, the two expenses that I think are likely to cost you some money are my travel costs. So I'm here tonight, and I'm expecting really only to come one more time. I think we can do everything else virtually. So I would want to be here for your final interviews. So let's just arguably say, and I do try to be really mindful of this, of the dollars that you're spending for that. But let's say that's $2,000 total. The other place that you are likely going to spend money on is your background check, which I think is really important that you do. And you might have 3 background checks to do. I would encourage you to do one on each of your finalists. So between those 2 buckets, consultant travel and background check, your 19 is getting close to 25. And I know that's a big leap, so I just want to be clear about kind of where I think that's going. You don't have to do background checks, and you can also say, Hank, we love you, but you can stay home for the final interviews and do it virtually. So, I mean, I just want to be mindful of you have a fiduciary, of course, you have a fiduciary responsibility that you take very seriously, and I don't want to make any presumptions around that. Let's say that you're good with what I just described, and so you're now looking at about a $25,000 project. There are still a couple other things that might cost some money. One is that candidate from Topeka who's going to fly out with about 4 days' notice. That's not a cheap ticket. You're going to want to put them up in a hotel for a couple of nights, give them a little bit of food. So that's going to cost a little bit of money. Those are pretty much the ones that I think you're likely going to have to spend. So if we took that 25 that I just spoke to a moment ago, and we don't know where your finalists are going to come from. They all might be local. It's possible they all won't be local. I would think it's probably somewhere in between, right? So we don't know. Let's put another $2,500 in there. So now you're up to 27.5, right? And I know that's a lot bigger than the 19 that was initial, but you knew that there were going to be some other expenses. Okay, what's left? So there are a couple things that I want you to just think about. These are lower cost items, but they may or may not be things that you want to contemplate. So if we look at our timeline, you'll notice that I'm getting my input to write the criteria and to learn about your district. I'm getting it from my one-on-ones with you and from the online survey. There is an option for me to also engage with some other groups of constituents. And I could do that if that's something that you wanted to do. The cost is not the same cost as what we just talked about. It's right around $200 a session. But if you wanted me, for instance, to have a focus group with your senior team or with your labor leaders or with community partners or with your parent leaders, that might be something that you want to invest. Or you might say, you know what, we're good. I just want to put that out there. Is that something you might want to do? The other thing that sometimes happens in school districts is that in the final interview, before the board meets with the finalists, in the confidential process, sometimes there's another small group of individuals who sign confidentiality affidavits and also interview candidates. Now, that can be a very rich thing. And what that would look like is, let's say you have 8 individuals who come across, who are microcosm of your community. You might have a couple staff people, you might have a couple community members, you might have a student on that panel. They would sign a confidentiality affidavit. They would interview the finalists under that confidentiality, and they would provide feedback to the board on on their sense of each candidate. And they're sworn to secrecy, and they complete a survey monkey that each of you read from each of the panelists about each of the candidates. So that gives you a little bit more information. That's also on the a la carte in the contract. So I throw those at you not to say that you need to do those or should do those. I want you to know the array of options and to think about whether those are things that you want to invest in or whether, I mean, you can't have everything. I mean, you've got a finite amount that you can work with. So if you want to talk to each other about that, or if you want to think about that or come back to that. But I think I think I'll just let you reflect on that.
I'm just gonna say, I think getting a little extra community input, some extra community input cannot be a bad choice.
Right.
Like, I would think that labor leaders, should definitely be I would think our union leaders, and I don't know if they can be counted on to encompass teachers, or, I mean, do we count on them to kind of cover the whole panoply of our educators? What do you guys think?
I'm a no on that.
You're no on having the labor leaders be, or?
And not just the labor leaders, I'm a no on picking 10 people too.
No, I'm not talking about having a panel to also do the interviews. I'm also a no on that because I'm always worried if they come out with someone and then we come out with someone else, then it ends up, there's always that, well, you didn't listen. I'm got kind of that lawyer in me, like, don't ask the question if you're not going to be ready to abide by the answer. So I'm with you. I don't necessarily want, but in terms of having focus groups, people saying what is
On the front
important
end.
to them.
On the front end in terms of
Yeah, on the front end.
informing the criteria.
So let's say we had the Ed Foundation maybe involved, maybe somebody from the arts, somebody from, I don't know. I'm just saying.
I'm a no for that, and
You're
I'll
no for
tell
that.
you why.
Oh, please do.
That choosing those people would be very difficult, and sooner or later, we're going to have to say, why did you choose those people? Why didn't you choose me, or why didn't you choose the mayor, or why didn't you choose the chamber head, or why didn't you, you know? Because sooner or later, after all this is done, somebody's gonna say, well, I served on a committee where we got to talk about the finalists. or
No,
about the
they wouldn't be talking about
candidates."
the finalists. These are just people who are just like, what do you think we need? They would be the ones answering these first three
I
questions.
thought that came through the survey.
Well, the survey goes out to everybody, but do we want a more focused group to make sure that the chamber weighed in, or the business association, or whatever we, you know,
Just for us to do that,
well, he
for
would
Hank
do,
to do that?
would do it would be a survey, right? Isn't that what we're talking here? Where you would
There
be
is a
more,
survey.
more,
So, yeah, so let me color that in. So the surveys goes out to everybody, anybody who wants response to the survey, and the surveys has those three questions. And then the offer, if you wanted, was there might be, let's say, a group, whatever group you can imagine, and 6 people in that group that I would actually meet with in a Zoom call. And I would actually ask those same questions. But in a Zoom call, you can go a little deeper. You can probe a little further. So that's what I think,
right.
Sarah, I think that's what you're speaking to. At the front end, in order to inform the criteria, in addition to the online survey, is there a value in having a few of those little groups or not?
I feel that there is.
I feel there is too.
Yeah.
I mean, the Ed Foundation, they can say, you can put out to the Ed Foundation, do you guys have, 5 folks who you want to have talk to?
So you want to have like 5 from the chamber, 5 from the Ed Foundation, all the labor leaders, each be separate groups?
Well, I think, yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, then we're talking about some money.
Well,
Some
what
more
you said
money.
is $200
It's
a
200
pop.
each. It's 200 each, right? So I think it's 195, to be honest.
I mean, if we can figure out a parent group, that's where I think we have the biggest trouble, is pulling together a parent. What we did, I believe when we did Marty, it might have been the one before, we just went to each school and asked for the PTA to send a couple of reps. So, because that was, but now I don't know that
That's not representative though, because.
well, it's as representative right as you can get with, I mean, the way you could get parents, or we put out, I mean, I'm just saying, I do think that those are voices that in some ways need a louder voice, because they're the ones who work with the district more, right? Like, so Susie, who's not ever had anything to do with the schools, says, well, all I'm interested in is whoever's gonna be the cheapest. And they're gonna send that in. They don't know anything about our school district, maybe, right?
And we're talking about from the survey that goes out
Yeah,
to
the general
everybody.
survey, there's no,
Same questions?
well, he's saying he would refine those a little more to be a little more specific, maybe. Is that what you're saying? It would be,
Yeah, I would frame it slightly differently, but kinda, yeah. I asked the
And-
questions, but when you're in a group of 6 with 35 minutes,
there's more
they're
back and
bouncing off
forth.
each other, there's talking, there's engagement, there's like, oh yeah, but what about this kind of thing? So it becomes more of a conversation than a fill out the form, but it is the same question.
Yeah, okay.
The difficulty I have is that we want quality response about what they're looking at
Right.
in terms of who we want to lead the district. And I would not want to have a group that has a lot of people that haven't been involved. And so my worry is that the quality of the answers will depend on the quality of experiences that these people have had, whether they've had a vendetta against the district, and so they're just focused on issues that really aren't relevant for us. So I don't want to open up something and then say, oh, well, we really didn't like the way they answered, so we're not going to use their work. So I have hesitation right now. I can't visualize exactly the groups or the
I
people.
can't either. Choosing
So I
them.
have to do more
Yeah.
thinking about that,
I just
honestly.
think
That's fair.
choosing groups like that is so biased.
Yeah,
I
that
mean, the
would be my
responses
worry.
are so biased.
So, I mean, another option is, which is really kind of in line with what the original plan is to, rather than create focus groups, is to just spend some time targeting the outreach in the survey. In other words, say, and it might fall to you, Casey, because oftentimes it does fall to the communications lead to get the word out. I mean, that you could do that if you'd prefer to do that, and say, just make sure you're hitting organizations A, B, and C, and making sure that they are calling them up or saying this link is there, that we want to hear their voices. That's a path you could take, which is more in line with your initial plan. Do you want to think about this more? Do you want to talk about it? Do you want to?
I think we need to decide because this is gonna have to happen so fast. And if the survey, if the, focus groups are up front, we are up front starting tonight. I mean, this is the beginning of the,
Stan, what do you think?
I think we should just do a survey and see what the responses are.
Okay,
well,
If we
we
could-
are doing one.
so survey and
Then we can
focus
decide
groups.
if we need more input.
Absolutely.
I don't know how to choose. I wouldn't know how to
Yeah.
choose those groups. That's fine. I mean, if you've done it before, how do you choose the focus groups? Which people do you bring in to serve in those
Yeah, it's a
focus
fair
groups?
question. So when districts do focus groups, and many do, it's a body of work, and it usually takes
Yeah.
a period of at least 2 to 3 weeks to figure that out. Sometimes there's a lottery aspect. In other words, we want parents. We don't know which parents. We can't just choose parents. Let's put a lottery out to the public. Whichever parent wants to go in can fill out a form, pull it out of their hat. We could do that. Now, the issue with that is that takes time, and you don't actually have a lot of time
Right.
to spend 3 weeks figuring out who's going to go into a focus group. You just don't have that in your timeline. So while that might work for another district, that I don't know that the lottery is something that you have the time to do.
What about just having an open forum and let people, like we did the night at the high school?
So that's another option
Let the
too.
board
It's-
listen to just invite people in for a board meeting and just talk about, what input that they want to give us.
You could do that. You could do that. Like a board hearing, like a board listening session.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could do that. Sometimes, and have you had listening sessions as a board?
Oh, yes.
So you know what they're like.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so I don't need to tell you what they could be like. Okay.
Well, I don't think they're like what you think they're like
Okay.
in Port Angeles.
Okay.
We have had, when we went through our strike, things were pretty, pretty fraught with
Yep.
tension. But since then, we've had board members available before every board meeting and nobody comes.
Nobody comes.
Okay.
I mean,
So
would they
we
have had
one group, we did have the one at the high school, yeah, that you're talking about. We did have that, and we had pretty good turnout. How many people do you think were there? 25?
Yeah.
But it's not,
But see, when you open that up, guess who shows up? Everybody that's got a row to hoe. They want to, and that's fine, and I'm glad we did it.
yeah, there's
And I-
space for that.
And
I mean,
that's when we decided then to open up an hour before each board meeting. No, nobody comes. Nobody's come. So we've
doesn't mean
cut
we-
that down to one board meeting a month where two of us sit and wait.
So, I mean, you could use that model, and maybe it would look different if people knew that they were, I don't know. Maybe it would look different if people knew that they were speaking to the criteria. I don't know if people would show up or not.
Staff has a lot to contribute. I mean, we want the staff
Yeah.
to have someone that they want to engage with. There's lots of opportunity for that within our district. And they would be the voice that I would want to hear. And so I would value that because they know and have had experiences. So when we look at who would we want, who has the most to gain or lose by the actions that we take in terms of that. So I think I would like, I mean, right now, this is off the top of my head, but I think that their professionalism and the great results that we get in our district could be honored by having some staff working with the associations to see where we want to have input. 'Cause
Or
right-
how we would do
And
it.
how. I think that, they know the systems here. And I think they would have a lot of value in looking for the person. And then I think that sets up the table for positive welcome. because they had an opportunity to say, boy, you know, this person has some things that we haven't seen before that we would value. So when we're looking at that, I'm more likely to consider staff and
Than-
hear them, hear their
than
voice
Anybody else?
about what they're looking for. Yes.
I think that's a good idea. Of course, they're gonna get a chance to do the survey too. But you're saying like ask each of the labor leaders to bring a group and,
They could lead their group and say, you know, what are qualities that we're supporting or we're interested in as the board's making this decision. And they still would
and
do
they
the
could bring
survey.
it to us. And then they would
Right.
bring that information to us.
They could bring that information to us. Yeah.
Do we have any, we don't have any here, but,
Karen was here and she
Yes.
had to leave.
and the other one, the secretary was here.
May
too.
may I offer a
Please.
thought? I wonder if it might make sense to have two focus groups on staff. One, and focus group actually engaging with me in a Zoom call, so two. One being labor leaders, and one being a staff person, one staff person from each school, that could be conducted really easily by a lottery at each school site. Could say,
People who are interested.
people are interested, there's a focus group on January 31st at 6 o'clock if you are interested. Sometimes the office manager of each school can just manage that. If you're interested, give your name to the principal, give your name to the office manager. At the end of the day, one name's going to be pulled out, and that person, and maybe they're a teacher, and maybe they're a paraprofessional, maybe they're the secretary, populates a Zoom call. So you have maybe two focus groups, one with labor leaders per se, and one with staff, whether they are labor or non-represented or leaders or anybody. How does that,
Yes, I think that's getting closer to what I would value for input. I don't know if the rest of the board feels that way or not, but
Yes, that was my idea with the focus groups, to focus on staff, labor.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, and then we just assume that parents are getting their opportunity just through the
survey.
survey.
And we have a board meeting, you know, we've got a
and we
board
have a
meeting at the end of
board.
the month. We can encourage them to come and speak then.
Yeah, that would be an appropriate place.
Yeah, I mean, we can make our pre-meeting meeting, really tell
Right.
people that's gonna be
This is
focused on
important.
Right.
what you want, and we have to make that clear in our communication, Casey, that we're gonna be at the Wildcat Cafe from 4 to 5 on, I don't know what date.
23rd. Are you talking about the board meeting
Next
next
board
Thursday?
meeting.
Yeah,
And this is your opportunity
is-
to provide input
Yeah.
about the qualities that you would like to see in a new superintendent.
right.
And-
'Cause-
And that would be focused to the community, not
Yeah,
to
because, I mean, we put the
staff.
agenda out,
Yep.
right, as it is, we always put the agenda out, and it always has that on there, but
Yep.
maybe if it's something that we could get specifically in the paper, that this is gonna be your
that's a great idea.
face-to-face opportunity to
Yep.
talk to the board.
It would be personal and honoring to say, we want to hear what is important to you, what
And
you
it would
value
be
for the
nice if
leader
all
of the
5 of us
district.
could be there this
Yes.
Well,
time.
then
I-
we have to call a special meeting.
Oh, it's already called. The agenda is published, it's already on there.
But
The 4 to.
the
4 to 5
5 of
o'clock.
us
Yeah.
can meet together that
Well,
hour.
because we're not meeting together, we're just all
We're
together,
all
and the
there in the
agenda
room.
has already been published
Yes.
with, we could all show up to the Wildcat Cafe anytime we want it, if we have that 4 to 5 already on our agenda that's been published.
Marty, is that right?
Because we're not making a decision.
Right.
Please, I'm
Absolutely.
asking you. Okay, I just don't wanna go to jail, no jail.
Yeah. And make it specific that
From 4 to 5.
come and talk to us about what you want. You're also gonna have an opportunity to have the survey.
Yes.
But
And
this
during
is an
public
extra-
comment on that meeting too, if
Yeah.
they can't be there that early.
Yeah, there's also time for public comment, as there always is at our board meetings. Does that make sense to you, Casey, what we just said? Okay.
So the board meeting will start at 4. Will it be here?
No, we'll do it down the Wildcat like we always
Wildcat.
do.
Like we do.
We'll all just take a booth and hope that some people show up and keep us entertained, or I'll have to dance. Nobody wants to see that.
That's good. Okay, I think that's a good idea, and that's,
So two focus
that's for
groups.
parents.
Yeah, for anybody, community, anybody who wants to
Community,
come. Yeah.
community or parents, yeah, but that's their
Yeah.
opportunity. And, yeah, I think that sounds like a good,
And then we'll contract for two focus groups, the unions and a teacher from each, or a staff member from each school.
Yep.
Who does a lottery sort of way to get, and maybe there's only gonna be one person from Roseville who's interested, or maybe we're not that interesting. I doubt that.
Obviously, we're not that interesting.
no,
I
I
think-
think
I-
that that gets to the people who have the most,
Yeah.
who we need to hear the input from.
Yeah, and if the principal is aware and knows who they've drawn, that person can then go out and talk to their own people.
That's right.
So you're saying use a lottery for this thing from 4 to 5?
No,
Use a lottery for what he's gonna do?
correct.
Yep.
For that focus group, to have somebody from each school. And we have to make sure we include Seaview in that, and Lincoln, and, make sure we hit all of our schools.
And district office too.
Yeah, district, absolutely, good point, yeah.
You can do that, yeah. Okay.
Are people gonna be mad because they weren't chosen?
There's only so much I can do. I can't knock on every
Lottery.
door.
It's a lottery,
I
yeah.
get mad every time I lose the lottery.
And
And I lose it every week. Oh, wait, I don't play.
nothing prohibits the building themselves to say, because they have their own structures and their teams. There's nothing to stop them from saying, our team will represent us. And if you have more you'd like to say, talk to the team members by this date so
Yeah.
that your voice can be heard.
Exactly, and they can do the survey, and they can come talk
And
to
they
us
can
at the
come.
Wildcat
Right.
Cafe.
Yeah, I think you have lots of options.
Okay.
So, all right,
Okay.
we made a decision.
Nicely done. So then I think we are ready to, I know we have a lot of items on the agenda. I just want to let you know, the biggest item is the one you're on. So once we get finished with this agenda item, the rest of the agenda goes a little more quickly. So I think we are ready to actually calendar.
Okay, good.
And Izzy, are you gonna also calendar while I'm calendaring, just in case I hit a wrong date, so I can double check it tomorrow, but I'm gonna do my best after all.
I get so confused when we're writing. I'm gonna,
So the first,
he's taking notes. Is that what's happened? Good. I'm not gonna try to.
so the first date I wanted to get on the calendar is, so the board one-on-ones are tomorrow, we already know that. The online survey doesn't really impact your personal schedule, right? So I will open that up on the week of the 20th, and I'll close it about a week later. I'll open the recruitment window on Sunday, the 19th, close it on February 12th. The first date that we need to actually calendar is when I can present to you the next superintendent criteria. So this is typically a work session, typically sometimes 60 minutes, sometimes 90 minutes. It depends on whether you are a board that likes to get into the weeds or whether you're more kind of the 50,000-foot level. So somewhere in the 60 to 90-minute range. And it can be attached to a board meeting if you already have one. So what looks good the week of the 27th?
January 27th.
January 27th.
Oops, let's go back here.
I'd rather do it in a work session or rather than in a board meeting.
Mhm.
Week of the 27th is this week.
I've made it so my life is wide open for the next 2
Yes.
I have no
So
desire.
I'm good.
So
We're talking about at night, right?
I'm good, whatever
Oh.
you,
I don't know what we're deciding here.
Tuesday night is the only night that's not good for me. I can do it during the day, I can do it any other evening.
Our open session.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I would rather, do we have a school board meeting that week?
No.
There's one on the 9th
And the
No,
20th?
week
and the
before.
23rd.
So we'd have to have a special session that
Yep.
week. Okay, so I'm good. Y'all just tell me when you can do it. I'm fine. So,
Okay, so it's an open meeting. We need to have an open meeting
Mhm.
for this.
a
So,
work session.
yeah, so it's a work session, but still it has to be advertised. And
Right.
do we want to do it in the evening, or do we want to, so more people can come if they want to, or do we want to do daytime? I mean, none of us has
I am good anytime.
I am better in the evening.
evenings, okay.
Okay.
So he
Evening is
can't do
fine.
Tuesday. Do we want to go with Thursday? Because we're used to Thursdays, or is that too late for you?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It works for me.
So Thursday, the
30th?
30th at 5 o'clock?
Okay.
Should we say 90 minutes?
Yes.
Yep.
January 30th. 5 o'clock.
The 30th.
Do you have any protocols or prohibitions against public comment in a work session?
I don't think we have prohibitions, we just have never taken public comment in a work session.
We've had people come to our work sessions, but no.
Could we?
I don't see why it's not against our rules. Yeah, so we could do, if you feel we should have,
I
That's
think
fine.
it's good practice to have at least one opportunity, and oftentimes nobody takes advantage of that, but I think it's good practice to have an to say we are taking public comment on the criteria, because that will be posted in advance,
Okay,
Yes.
so people will see it, and
that's
then,
fine.
And that would be the 30th?
yep.
Mhm.
Would
Perfect.
you zoom into that meeting?
I'm sorry.
Would you zoom into that meeting?
Oh, yeah. No, I would facilitate that meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
He's running it. He's giving us the info.
Yeah, so
411.
I would draft that up, I would get it to you ahead of time. I would also ask Casey to post it on the web,
Right.
right? So people can look at it, and if someone feels called upon to also make a statement at the beginning of your meeting, say, I like this or I didn't like that, then that's helpful information.
Okay.
Okay, so the Thursday, the 30th, from 5 to 6:30?
Yep.
Perfect, okay.
And would you repeat one more time what we're doing at that?
Yes.
Just for clarity.
Yes, so you will get a document called your draft next superintendent criteria. You'll have had a chance to look at it, and you will, in that work session, collectively talk about, does this work? Do you want to make some edits? Do you want to throw some things out? Do you want to bring some things in that aren't there?
And it's public opportunity.
No.
Okay. And that's the 30th.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay,
Gotcha.
beautiful. Thank you, board. So let's now look at the week that starts with President's Day. Now, you will have received a link to the applications about 4 days prior to President's Day, and you'll have scheduled yourself to review those materials. And then sometime, I would like it to be the 18th if that's possible, and if it's not the 18th, as soon thereafter as possible.
18th looks good for me.
It's clear for me.
Should be fine.
Mhm.
Is that good for
That's
you?
a Tuesday.
All day?
No, good question. I only need 2 hours from you.
2 hours on the 18th.
And is there no school on the 17th for President's Day holiday?
Correct.
Yeah, that's good. It's a federal.
Okay, so the 18th, we're going to meet virtually or in person? Virtual,
I think virtually.
okay. And we're going to do,
So we need to be in here.
And it's closed session.
Do you need to be in here? Could you do virtual from your own homes
Oh, as a session? I don't know.
in executive
Closed
session?
I just like it
No, I-
when we're together.
Yeah, I like it.
You
when
like?
we're
Okay.
together.
If that's,
Okay,
so we can do from here, we can go
and
to a
that's,
smaller
that's an
room, but-
executive session.
so it is an executive session. At the end, it's in public session. Do you want me to come up for that? Kirsten says no.
Remind me what we're gonna do then. We're gonna look
Executive to start with, and then we're going to move into
an open
an
session.
open.
And what will we do? What,
So when we meet in that meeting, we will
list?
deliberate. I believe the language of the OPMA is, we will evaluate, I believe that's the right language, evaluate the candidates collectively. So we'll go through some products that we'll evaluate without selecting. In the executive session, we evaluate, and then we come out of executive session and into open session. So we'll need to have both executive and open session. And in the open session, you will select your first round interviewee candidates, maybe 5 or so candidates.
By letter.
How are we gonna do that and keep it confidential?
Right.
We're doing it by letter, because Joe Smith is gonna be letter B. He's gonna be letter B through the whole time. Gosh, we don't have any Joe Smiths, do we? I always use that name. So we'll say, okay, Mary will say, okay, I'm in open session. I would like to move B to our finalist category. Just B. Just Joe Smith is just B. We don't say his name ever.
Okay.
Am I,
You're right, and I'll walk you through the whole thing. When you see the applications, you're gonna see Joe Smith B. That's his name on the file. And then when we are in open session, you'll refer to him simply as B.
Okay.
And you'll know, yeah, don't worry, you will be,
Okay.
you'll on it.
okay,
Yep.
and that, you said it's about a 2-hour meeting?
The slate meeting, I wanna have 2 hours. It
Okay.
sometimes goes much shorter, but in case it doesn't, I wanna have enough time to really,
So that would be a 3 to 5, and then, I mean, our normal board meeting starts at 5.
And that would be fine for me.
Is that okay for people?
What day that is?
Is that okay for you?
yeah,
The
the 18th at 3 to 5?
Is it 2 hours total, or is it 2 hours of executive session? And
I would say it's
then-
2 hours of executive session and 15 minutes of open session goes fast.
Okay. So we're here to decide what time we're gonna do that. And we prefer the evening?
Well, because we're
This
gonna
is
have
on a
to,
Tuesday evening.
yeah, and we're gonna have to go into open session, so usually that happens at 5. I mean, we can,
Normal board.
yeah, I just said our normal board meeting for our open session, which he says goes very quickly.
Okay, so we'll be here from 3 to 5?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I
3 to
needed
5:15.
3 to 5:15. Okay.
Okay. All good so far?
And that's just us?
Just,
Executive and then an
right.
open.
And then open.
right. The exec sessions on candidates really should only be the 5 of you.
Yeah.
And- yep.
Okay.
Okay. So now we get to the first round interviews. This is a lengthy day. If you would be willing, I would like you to block out 8 a.m. to 6:30, but if you tell me you can't do that, we will find a time that will work for you.
And which day are we looking at?
So I had said the 22nd, but I think that is problematic. There's an event. Is
It
that the
is
day of the
for
Wanda Food?
me,
That's
Oh.
that Saturday we were talking
Yeah,
about.
until, I'm available until 5, 6 at the latest.
Okay, and you don't want to go to that event totally tired from having been in,
Oh, that doesn't bother me.
that doesn't bother you?
No, I just have to put my costume on.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Are you performing?
No.
So that's an option, 8 to 5 that day. We could do 8 to 5
Yeah,
is
and
one
I can go
option.
till 6. I can
Okay,
finish it till
8 till 6 we could do.
Okay, 8 to 6.
Or would you rather do like Monday, the 24th? Or typically boards don't want to do Sundays, but
I can't do Monday the 24th.
you can.
No.
Okay. It's the 22nd, a day that people could do?
That day.
Give up a
Fine.
Saturday?
Yeah. 8 is gonna be a bit of a stretch, but I can do it. No words, Marty. I can make it at 8.
So 8 to 6 on the 22nd, is that what we're?
Yep.
All day. And that's when we're getting down to the nitty-gritty.
We're,
Yes, and I would call that all similarly in executive session followed by an open session. Do you typically, when you have executive sessions, do you start an open session and then move to executive session, or do you just start an executive session?
We usually move into executive session.
We've done
So in all of
both.
these, you're starting an open, going to executive, and then coming back into open.
Okay, so this is the 22nd from 8 a.m. Oh, good grief. Casey, can I put in a request for a big coffee pot?
Now, these, let's talk about this. I would much prefer that you're not in this room. Are you agreeing with me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we're all virtual?
To me, that makes the most sense because we're gonna have trouble hearing each other. And the candidate seeing, you know, if we're
It's hard
all
for a
on our
candidate
own,
to be
then
on
you
the
can
screen
see-
interviewing with you
Yeah.
and you're all in the same room.
Yes,
How do you feel about that?
as long as it's legal.
So we're doing it all from our own homes.
That would be my ask. I just think it's a higher quality interview when you're doing it and you're all on an individual Zoom square rather than,
Okay, I hear you,
yeah.
but I think maybe we need to have an option for some people to Zoom from here.
Oh,
Because their own homes might,
Confusion.
oh, totally, totally.
okay.
Yeah, you can be wherever you want, yeah. But
Okay.
everybody would be on their own screen. Is that,
So we could do it here on our own screen. Yeah, that's what I would prefer.
okay, I didn't.
Because then we've got support. We've got Casey, if something goes weird, we could ask our other,
But that's on a Saturday, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yes,
so he
So
wouldn't be
Casey
here.
won't be here.
He'll be here.
well, we could have someone here, I'm
Yeah.
sure, that could be our
So, but
support
is there,
staff.
Oh, okay, good, thank
my only
you.
concern would be, is there some reverberation if we're all calling in on our own computer?
And there's no reason why we'd all have to be here, correct?
No, like, I
Yeah,
can do it,
would-
I have
I would
good,
be at home.
I have good interwebs at home.
Yeah.
But if we have an option for people to.
Absolutely. My only concern was about the single screen. Where you happen to be sitting is not a worry to me.
We can sort that.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So I'll make my own dang coffee.
You know you want to be with us.
All right, so I think we have a plan for the 22nd, February 22nd, from 8 to 6. That'll be a fun day. Okay, we've got,
February 22nd, 8 to 6.
we're almost there. Let's look at the possibility team of February 27th and 28th.
Okay, I'm sorry, I have
Yep,
one more then.
please.
So we do that closed session, then we go into open session, and at that point, we move forward. When do we have, we don't really have a chance for us to sort of suss out each candidate? We're just coming in here blind, like,
No, we certainly suss out each candidate.
okay,
So the model of the day is that the reason why it's a long day, candidate A interviews, at the end of that interview, you evaluate candidate E collectively. We do a protocol. Then
Okay.
candidate B, you evaluate candidate B. So we go through that throughout the day. The OPMA does allow you also to discuss, we'll be careful around making sure that we honor the law.
right,
You are allowed to evaluate more than one person at the same time, and so we will do a little bit of that at the end of the day, as long as we're staying in the evaluation mode.
right,
And so there is, I think what you're driving at, there is that.
okay,
And then the true deliberation does happen in open session.
okay, good.
Dr.
So at
Long?
the end of that day,
Yeah.
we go into open session, even though and that'll be virtual. All this is virtual. Okay.
That would be my ask.
Okay.
Oh, right, because it has to be open, how does?
Gotta open it, gotta close it, gotta move it.
So if it's open, how do people come to our board meeting?
Is Zoom link not
So
something
we'll have
that?
to have a Zoom link for everybody for the next, okay. We can do it. This
Yeah.
is 2025. We can
And I
do it.
typically, by the time we get to this stage of interviews, it's usually my link. So I would be happy to, I once had a board that didn't want me to have the link because they felt like it had to be a district link, but most of the time boards are comfortable with me.
No,
preparing
that's
the
fine, but
link.
we'll need 2 links, right? Because once we go to open session,
Yes, that is
We don't-
correct. That is correct.
I
You will,
really
right,
don't want
that's right.
everybody in.
Yeah, right, so you flip, that's correct. So you open in one link, and then you go to the other link, yep.
We did that during COVID. We have experience, we can do it.
Yeah.
So couldn't I display you up there to take us into executive session and open session? Right? Because don't we have to zoom it? Or I mean,
Yeah, it'll have to
have
be,
it on camera?
Yeah, because people have to be able to go in onto the Zoom link and we'll have to ask for we'll have to ask for comments and then people have to raise their little hands and come into the.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna have to think this through.
Yeah, and I can be part of that conversation too, because I've seen it a few different ways. Sometimes you would open the session and just leave a link live the whole day that says the board's in executive session. You don't have to sit there the whole day. You just have the Zoom open.
Okay, so
All right, we'll figure that out.
that's the 22nd that we're still talking
We're
about.
still on the 22nd.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. And the 22nd would be the last time we would be virtual
Okay.
with candidates, because the next events are in person. I would be here with you.
The 27th and 28th.
We would, because of the model that you're selecting, which is a non-reveal of finalists, it would be important that the interviews are not held here and not held at a school, but held somewhere off-site. You don't have to decide that right now, but I'm looking at the superintendent as to who would be the person to figure that out, whether that's a hotel conference room or whether that's a nonprofit center. There's somebody in the district that I could work with that would figure that out.
Library.
Okay.
Steve's office.
Steve has a conference room. Everybody knows Steve's conference room.
Steve's conference room.
Oh, yeah, it's famous. No, my husband's insurance agency has a conference room in the back that we
Okay.
often do community things at.
That sounds promising.
Yeah, and you can't,
This is an
you don't
easy
know
one.
who's coming or going because it's in the alley.
It's in the
And it's free.
I
So,
like it. All right.
anyway.
And it's the nicest alley in Port Angeles, by the way.
I like it. All right, we'll figure that out.
Okay.
What does that look like if we did the 27th and 28th of February?
I'm wide open.
It's fine for me.
27th and 28th.
Thursday and Friday.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We have a board
And we
meeting
have
on
a
the
board meeting
27th.
on the
What time is
27th.
that, Casey?
5 p.m.
5 o'clock.
Always at 5.
And these are the final interviews.
Correct.
And how does that day go? There are 3 of them in this town, hopefully not at the same place.
Right.
But, or do they have to be 3? What if it's just 2?
It could just be 2.
Okay.
2 is certainly simpler to manage than 3.
Okay.
So what it would look like is, and so we have to work around a board meeting, so I'm going to pretend for a moment that I don't know you have a board meeting that day, just to describe what the day would look like. Let's say you do have 3. Then there would be a candidate that comes in the morning, there'd be a candidate that comes in the late afternoon, there'd be another candidate that comes the next morning, and I'm going to talk about what that looks like in a minute. And then on the second day in the afternoon would be your deliberation time. And specifically what that looks like is, it's a lengthy interview because this is like high stakes time. This is,
Yeah.
one of these people is likely your next superintendent, right? Typically, it starts, this is how I would like to structure it if I could. For the first hour, wait, let me time out for a minute. So prior to this set of interviews, every interview that the candidate engage in is a scripted interview. We haven't talked about that. I'll ask for your input. I'll look at the criteria and I'll ask your permission to write a set of interview questions based on your direction to me.
Okay.
And some of you will give me a whole bunch of questions, which will be great, and some of you might not, and that's fine. And then I'll reconcile them against the criteria to make sure that we're hitting as many criteria as we can. But from a fairness, from an HR perspective, we want to ask each candidate the same question in your first round interviews. In your second round interviews, I want you to take a little bit of, and I'm an HR guy, I think you know that, so I tend to be a real this kind of HR guy. But in a final interview with superintendents, I got to weigh that against the fact that they've already had one scripted interview with you. There's only 3 left, and this is really your time to really grill them on, and each candidate is different. And so I allow you some liberty in that second interview to actually ask candidate-specific questions. And you're going to ask those questions based on, you're already going to have a whole lot of input from them because you're going to have had the first round interview, you're going to have looked through their application paperwork, you're going to have done all these telephone reference checks. And so there's like questions on each candidate that you're going to want to know. So in the second interview, there's much more of an opportunity for you to create interview questions specific to each candidate. Does that make sense? Yes, ma'am.
It makes sense, absolutely. There has to be an HR cheat sheet of things we are not allowed.
I have it right here.
Ask, because
have it right
I'm
here.
sorry, I can tend to go off the rails sometimes, and I need to have that, and I need to review it and make sure I don't break the
You're gonna have
law.
that before midnight tonight.
Okay,
Oh, okay, yay.
appreciate
Yeah,
that.
and we'll go over that. And by the time we get to that, we're gonna be best friends. And I'm gonna be sitting there. So I'm also gonna be like, we're not gonna say that, and we're all gonna kind of chuckle.
Yeah, you can
Okay.
kick me
Yeah.
if, I mean,
Yeah. I won't need to, but
you might.
I won't, yeah, thank you for that.
Enough
But
people
I'll
have
have
worked
that-
with me
I'll have
long
that
enough.
document tonight, yeah. So
Scott's
there
over there going, yeah, you're gonna need to kick her.
But you're absolutely right. There are things, and it is actually easy to move into that when you're getting comfortable with somebody and you're with somebody for an hour and a half. Like, oh, tell me, about your kids and where they go to college. Like, no, we don't ask questions about people's families in an interview, right? Okay, so the first hour, it's what we call study session. Five of you are going to think about what you want to know from this candidate. So you're going to actually plan in the first hour, and then you're going to have a 2-hour interview with this candidate. In those 2 hours, my recommendation, like I like to preface with my recommendation because we're all in this together and you can push back on me, you can say I want to do something different and that's fine. My recommendation is that in a 2-hour interview, 90 minutes of it is you asking questions to the candidate at that time, and 30 minutes is for the candidate to own the agenda. And I say own the agenda.
Okay.
In a very standard interview, which is not what I'm describing, in a very standard interview, you end the interview with, okay, do you have any questions of us, right? This ain't that. This is, you have 30 minutes. Hey, Pat, you're interviewing for the superintendent. You're one of 3 finalists. You have 30 minutes to engage with this board on a topic or an issue that's important, and I want them to experience you as their superintendent. That's directions I give that person. What they do with that, how they do with that, how they engage with you is up to them. But I want you to see a different side of them. I want you to see, like, this is what it would feel like if we were actually working together. So if you were okay with that, that's how I would structure the 2 hours. 90 minutes, that's more about Q&A, and 30 minutes, that's, and it's not about preparing a presentation. It's about how are you engaging with this board. So if you have 1 hour of study time, 2 hours of the actual interview, and probably at least 30 to 40 minutes to debrief afterwards, that's a morning. And then you repeat that in the afternoon. That's enough for one day. You do that again the next morning in the morning, and those are your 3 finalists. So given that you have a board meeting Thursday night, I'm trying to think in my head whether we could still do 2 interviews before a board meeting. I assume the board meeting must start at 5 o'clock. And you're a morning person. I think we could do it. If we could start at 8 o'clock, we could do that.
Killing me, Small.
That'll be a long day because you're finishing and then you're going to a board meeting. You're going to be tired. I'm trying to think if there's another option.
To the second day?
Well, it's the first day is when the board interview is. I'm sorry, the first day is when the board meeting is.
Right, but so I was wondering if we could do 1 that day and 2
To the second day. We could do that. We
But
could
then
do
we
that.
don't have the time to,
Then you don't have the time to deliberate. Sometimes boards don't deliberate. Let me think that through for a minute. So if we did 1 on the 27th, I like your thinking. 2 on the 28th. Oftentimes boards come back to deliberate, which isn't a bad thing because then you have like at least a night to sort of sleep on things.
so then we'd have to come back on Saturday to.
Well,
to
I
finish the
can't be with
process.
you on Saturday the 1st, but I could be with you. I can't be with you on the 1st.
So we need to do 2 the first day.
Well, I don't.
Is there anything special, Marty, about the board meeting on the 27th of February?
That's a good question.
Sometimes we have something really special. Sometimes we just have a normal board meeting that lasts an hour and we can all go home.
I can look it up. if
Can you
want.
look it
That
up
would be helpful, I think.
for the 27th
7.
of February?
We're in control of
We
these.
have Student of the Month, Franklin Elementary School report, CTE report, MAP, ELA, and Dibbles with Michelle.
It's a big one.
January financial enrollment. It's CTE month and public schools week.
I might be
That's a
able,
big one.
Sounds like a lot.
what about, I think I could you meet, so if we took the Kirsten model and we did one on the 27th, two on the 28th, could you meet Saturday morning the 1st? I think I might be able to meet in the morning of the 1st.
I'm good.
That's just another, okay.
You have a lot going on Friday night, Saturday morning.
No, heck no. Are you kidding me?
All right.
Sleep.
How does that?
All right. That's
Yeah.
unique.
What-
We're like, night.
I'm just thinking then he's going to have to stay
that what-
another night.
27, okay. Are we
Guess he
landing on
would
that?
Stay another
the
night
first, yeah.
anyway.
Dr. Long, you're okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll do the morning of the 27th, the morning and afternoon of the 28th, and then the morning of the 1st to deliberate. And in the event that you only have 2 finalists, then we just wrap it up on the 28th.
Okay.
That'd be
Okay.
March
What
1st.
time of the morning on the 28th or the 27th?
I think y'all should tell me what time you can start.
Sorry, where is that? That's the Friday, no, it's Thursday.
What time do you want to start on the 27th?
We're only doing one interview.
Oh, yeah, we're only doing one, so we shouldn't kill ourselves on the 27th.
I'm loving what you're saying. 10?
Well, then we're into lunch and we've got, we've got 4 hours that we're going to be dealing with, basically.
1, 2. Then we have from 2 to 5 off. Well, we're going to get into lunch either way.
Okay, that's fine. I'm fine with that.
'Cause
10
if
to-
we do 8.
10 to 2, is
Well,
that?
if we did 8, we wouldn't be to lunch. We'd go 8 to 9, 10, 11, 12. 9.
8 to 12 on the
late night?
27th is
8
what
to
you're
12
saying?
on the 27th. That's real early, though, for somebody to have to get here if they're coming from elsewhere. 8 seems early.
Well, you're going to get here an hour before the candidate.
So
What about
we need
9?
4 hours.
9,
What
I
about
think
9?
9 o'clock
o'clock.
sounds better.
I think that's good.
27th,
That's
9
all right.
o'clock,
Yeah, and then you can, if
9
you
to
want,
1.
candidate leaves at noon, candidate goes out for lunch. You've got noon to 1, you might even want to have lunch together while you
Right.
debrief,
Ah,
maybe.
We have lunch delivered, Casey. All right, 9. I'm putting it in my calendar, 9
That's
a.m.
9 to
27th,
noon on the 27th,
9 to 1.
9 to 1,
Because we need 4 hours of time.
yeah.
Okay, so,
And you could do that again on Friday.
the
You know, I don't know,
28th,
they- You could do 9 to 1 and 2 to 6 if that feels okay to you.
9 to 1, and then 2 to 6 on the 29th,
On the
28th.
28.
on the 28th, okay.
9 to 1 and 2 to 6.
Yeah, then you take an hour off for lunch.
Mhm.
What did I put my board meeting in, and now I seem to have lost it. What's going on? Ay, ay, ay.
So that is a
Casey, are you
closed,
thinking that you would be able to take all this conversation that we've had and create a nice calendar with all of this?
Oh, yeah. It'll,
Okay, I just want to be
It'll all
sure
be-
before we exit today that you have any questions answered. Okay.
and then so we come back on Saturday morning?
Yep.
And there's a board meeting that night. I need to put that down so I won't forget.
On the 27th.
So that 28th, we basically go 9 to 6.
Right.
All right.
And so that'll finish 3 interviews, if in fact we have 3 interviews. Let's say we only have 2, could we do, we'd be finishing up on Friday then, rather
correct,
than
yeah.
Saturday. Okay, but if we have 3, so what are we gonna do Saturday?
So I think we need a 2-hour block Saturday morning.
2 hours.
And if we could be done by 11, that would be
Okay.
great.
9 to 11. Now, all of this is in executive session, correct?
All of it with one exception, which is on Saturday, On Saturday, if we're going from 9 to 11, we should have an open session
At the end.
11 to 11:15.
11 to 11:15 is what you said?
Yeah. So on this February the 27th, so Thursday, so this is Thursday, Friday.
And so location-wise, I would have the 27th and the 28th off-site because you've got candidates, but on the 1st, it could be right here because you don't have candidates.
And that open session would be for the purpose of,
Moving forward one candidate into contract negotiations.
okay, so this says selection announcement isn't until the 7th.
Correct.
But now we're saying it's going to be on the 1st?
No, so good question. So on the 1st, if all goes according to plan, and it will, again, Pat, who's known by letter B, there'll be a motion to enter contract negotiations with
Okay.
candidate B. And then you are going to get to work on a contract. What happens on the 7th or soon thereafter is an open meeting where there's a motion to award the contract to Pat by name. That make sense?
Okay, I get it. So it won't be out in the public who the person is, just we've selected
A lead candidate.
a lead candidate. B. And then that will be announced then at our next board meeting.
On the 7th.
Yeah, I would wait to see if there's a couple of things to think about just with respect to that. One is, I love when that meeting is not part of a regular board meeting. I love when that is a special meeting, a short meeting, a 30-minute meeting, and the only agenda item is the announcement of candidate. Because it's a celebration, and sometimes board meeting stuff can sort of take away from some of the kind of the hoopla, right? You also don't know how quickly you're going to get a contract written. Like, sometimes it takes a couple more days than you think it is. So
Yeah.
I would aspire to
That's
do
a
it
good idea.
around then, but I wouldn't commit right now to what the date has to be.
Okay.
Right, okay, that sounds good.
Board, congratulations. No, I sincerely mean that. That was hard work. We're going to get through the rest of the agenda rather quickly. Thank you. And thank you for being so easy to calendar with. Much obliged. All right. Shall we continue?
Yep.
Okay. We've gone through, I know it looks a little overwhelming, like we've gone through 1 and 2, but we're going to move a little more speedy. Communication norms are 2 things that I'd like to either ask your consent about or share. The first part of communication norms is this, that you have given me the honor of being your representative in this search, and that includes being the person that's talking to candidates. I would like to ask you that when candidates approach you, if they do, you do not engage in conversations with them.
Okay.
And I can tell you why, but I think you already know, right? It gets awkward, it's uncomfortable, some people get access to you, some people don't get access to you. So what I would ask you to do is if a candidate reaches out to you and say, I am so interested in being, I've been watching your meetings, Kirsten, can I have 15 minutes to just talk to you? Say, I'm so glad you're interested. Hank Harris is our search consultant, here's his email address, here's his phone number, he'd be happy to talk to you. What do you think? Can we all do that?
Yes,
Yep, no problem.
absolutely.
Superintendent, they will often call you. And it's harder for you because you've got relationships with people all over the state, and some of those people might be interested enough and they want to pick your brain. I would give them, I wouldn't hang up the phone on them when they call. Give them 1 or 2 to say, it's a great district, it's an exciting opportunity, and then if you would mind, give them my contact information. Thank you, sir, yeah. And that is hard for the sitting superintendent
I'm
because she will
sure.
get calls. There might be people who are not candidates but have a strong interest in you hiring somebody or not hiring somebody. They will contact you. They might send you emails. If they send you an email, simply say, I am referring this. I would not even respond other than saying, I'm referring this to our consultant. Don't say thank you or not thank you or I agree or disagree or anything. And if they call you to lobby, same deal. But I want to make sure you're all good with that.
Yes.
I want to be able to say that.
It keeps you in the safe space that you need to, so that you can make the right decision without feeling or having the perception of those things that you don't need to be bothered by. Okay. The other communication norm is how we all interact. So typically the way I do that is I work with one board lead, and I think you talked about that at the last meeting, and I think, is that Director Williams?
Yes.
Of
So
the
you're my
Kirsten
partner on
variety.
this?
Yeah.
And sometimes we'll just talk about logistics and we'll just figure it out, right? And sometimes it'll be more substantial. In that case, you'll be a conduit to the rest of the board and you'll communicate information out. Okay. With respect to candidate information, if there's information that I need to give you or want to give you, and as we get into candidates, you will, I will communicate. I think I'll communicate directly to you, Kirsten, and ask that you forward all the information, because I want all board members to have the same information about candidates. I don't want some board members to have some information and others not.
And generally that needs to go through Casey.
Would you
Yes.
prefer that I work through Casey on it?
Well,
Well, if it's about
if-
Yes,
candidates,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
she
'cause we
can't,
need-
like, she can't send stuff to us.
that's right.
Everything
that's right,
has to go
that's
through
right.
Casey.
That's
He's-
right. So, and because we want, so I think what I might do, if that's okay, because I want to respect Casey's place in this as well and not compromise him, may I just email the 5 of you if it's candidate-specific information?
Yeah, if you can do us each
Yes.
individually, yeah.
You know the rules. Clearly, it's clear that you know the rules
Yeah.
about not.
I mean, if he sends it to all of us, please just don't hit reply all. I
Right,
think
right.
I've harped on that enough that I think
right.
we all
Yeah,
get
I think
that.
you all know that rule, right? Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Great, okay. You sound like you know the rules and the regs around that, so we're good to go. There are,
I do this.
number 4 is staff support, and I think Casey might be the answer to all of these, but let me just check. Well, we just talked about logistics and communication flow, and typically I'll work with Kirsten. Casey, there might be times that you and I are talking about a room assignment or whatever, so we'll just speak with each other. But I think more likely you and I are talking about letter C, which you're on top of, which is communications and website. So that's Casey. And then there are 2 focus groups that you talked about that you want me to organize, and I guess I need a staff. I mean, it's not a lot. It's a small amount of work, but I think I need a staff person to just check in with on that focus group, on the 2 focus groups.
Okay.
Is that it?
So staff, I mean, would that be you as well? You'd be the person who,
I think it
I think Casey's gonna do pretty much.
makes sense to me.
Poor Casey, poor Marty is losing his executive assistant for,
Well, he's our only
Uh,
I know.
assistant
Should be
clerk or whatever.
Is it okay
Yeah.
if I work with Casey on that? Okay, Casey, I think it's you.
Yes. thank you.
As I wrote in the proposal, it's really a commitment I have to you that I'm not belaboring your staff. So these are the discrete areas where I'm going to use staff. It's right there, and I will not be throwing a whole bunch of other things at you, like please do this, like that's not your job. So whatever you see here that your name is next to, thank you, but you can be sure that other things are not going to be added to your plate, with one exception. When we get to final interviews in person, it is usually very helpful for me to have a member of the staff with me at those interviews in terms of welcoming candidates. And at that point, I'd like to bring you into the circle. So I'm going to look for nods.
Yeah.
The day of the final interviews, could we free him up on the 27th and 28th, be supporting the board on those days? It's like, thank you, sir. Okay, are you good with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
we're
awesome.
fine.
We are all the way, see how fast we moved? We are all the way at number 6. So number 6, I always discuss with boards, we don't know who's going to apply for the job. But there's always the possibility that internal folks might apply. And so I would want to, most of the time, 95% of the time, the board would like to have the same standard for all candidates, whether they are internal or external, which means that they are assessed by me against your criteria. They move forward in the process on their own merits and not simply because they might be an internal candidate. Are you comfortable with same rules apply to all candidates?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Publicity issues we've already covered. That's the issue about whether you want to reveal the names of the finalists in public space. You've made a unanimous decision around that. Salary range for the new superintendent, we are not discussing tonight, but it is something that you need to come to some agreement upon soon, because, well, that's not, well, on the timeline, the job goes live next week. And soon thereafter, there might be candidates saying, I'm really interested in the job. Let's talk about how great Port Angeles is. And oh, by the way, what might they be paying? Right? That's a fair question. I don't love when it's the first question they ask me. But sometime in the conversation, they ought to be able to know that, right? Which means that probably in your next, and Casey's thankfully already done some, no, Scott, I'm sorry, not Casey, Scott. Scott, how are you, my friend? Scott has done some work already in terms of looking at some comps. I think what would be wise is if there is at your next board meeting an opportunity for Scott to present that material and get a sense from the board about a salary range. I think that would be good. Is that doable?
May I ask a question? So Scott, would you be like doing what we do for other positions where you're comparing like district size? Okay, thank you.
And when is that next board meeting?
Next Thursday.
That is beautiful. Okay, so what we'd be looking to come out of that is a range that the board is comfortable with.
Right. Thank you, Scott.
Do we
Thank
need
you, Scott. Advertising, we probably should talk about tonight since the board is since we're going to open it up.
I'm sorry, I just have to go back one more. Okay, so the board meeting isn't until Thursday, but you're going live Sunday.
That's okay.
Okay.
I will tell the candidate whose first question is, what's the salary?
Yeah.
If you're watching this video, don't let that be your first question. So that's okay. If a few days go by and I don't know that, I'm perfectly comfortable saying, and it might not even come up in the first few days.
Okay.
But we certainly want it well before and I think you're fine with your timeline.
Okay, good. All right,
Okay.
publicity.
So I typically don't suggest a whole lot of advertising, and I'll tell you why. I feel pretty confident in our ability with the firm and the listserv to get the word out really well. And the other thing that we'll be doing through the survey and through the one-on-ones is we start to build so including in that survey, I told you what the 3 questions were. There's a couple other small questions. One is there anybody you would like to see apply for this job? And a lot of people throw names out. And sometimes contacting those names, sometimes those folks are interested. Just as often, those folks point me to other people that might also be interested. I also have, I'm not new to this region in terms of having done some searches nearby, so some folks that I know I want to call are folks in your nearby districts. Maybe they're applicants, but I'm thinking more about them as folks who know people, right? So even if you had a 0 advertising budget, I feel pretty good about our ability to do some outreach. On top of that, WASDA should be free services to you because I'm sure you have a license to post, Scott. WASDA, do you have a license to post for free? Yeah. So the question would be, do you want to spend a little bit more money on advertising or do you not? And okay, no.
I don't.
I don't.
I don't either.
yeah.
Okay, then I don't need to go through the list.
Unanimous, yeah.
Okay, so we'll do WASDA, we'll do WASDA, we'll do our listserv, and I think you're going to hit a lot of people that way. Easy, okay. Residency expectation. Did this come up in your previous superintendent searches? Do you remember this conversation?
No.
Okay, so years ago, it used to be an expectation in most districts that the superintendent would live within the jurisdiction of the school district.
Oh, I misunderstood the question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the question. And a lot of times, I think some boards still want to do that, and other boards are less inclined to make that like a showstopper. The argument, you can see the argument for wanting the superintendent to be a taxpayer and to be committed to the community and live in the district. Housing costs that they are, other issues, people sometimes live nearby and have kids going to high school in another town. So what do you think? Where's your heart with that? How important is that to you that they live within the geographical boundaries of the Port Angeles School District?
For me, it is very
Okay,
important.
for Dr. Long, it's very important.
For me.
Yes.
I don't want them living on Bell Hill and Squim.
Yep.
I want them right here where they can get to every basketball game, and I don't wanna hear that they pay taxes and, yeah,
And
for
where the
me.
public
that's-
has contact with
yeah,
them.
Absolutely.
I agree. I mean, I can see some situations where like Place Road or just
that's
past
where
our
Mark lived.
corner, those are just, close enough to our boundaries that
Right.
it seems kind of like I don't really want to say you can't apply if you're not gonna willing to live, I don't know, but I see what you're saying. I agree. I don't want somebody who's, driving in from Bainbridge every weekend.
No, no,
No.
But,
or even
I mean, can
Squim.
we have a little squish?
My preference is Little Squish, Joyce, Squim, especially if they have kids that are in school. I could see
And put
not
their
wanting-
kids in the Squim school? Uh-uh.
Yeah.
No, I would not be happy with
Okay.
that. I would not be happy with that. I would be really angry with that. I mean, I don't care where their kids go to school, just so it's our public schools.
You can go anywhere you want as long as it's Port Angeles. No, I hear what you're saying, but I don't know. I feel like just a little squish would be.
And the housing is tight. That's the other issue.
Housing is very
Yeah.
tight.
So, I vote for a little wiggle room, but
Yeah, I don't know how you would word a little squish, but
Would you want people to live in Squim?
I guess it doesn't bother me that much.
here's my
Yeah,
thing.
and I lived in a small, I lived 4 small school districts, boom, 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 boom. And I saw it work well for the kids of the superintendent because they are small districts too, as part of it, going to a neighboring district and not having that pressure of being in their parents' district.
Well, I feel like the way we are set up, I don't think this is gonna even be an issue. I mean, it could be, Place Road or just past our corner, but I don't
Yeah.
think it's gonna be I don't think this is gonna end up being really a big issue. But, I mean, let's, yeah.
I just want to
Let's
be
say
on record
yes.
as saying
We
what
would,
I thought.
we would,
I've said what I
we
thought.
would prefer residency, and maybe, can we say on a kind of a case, I don't know. Come on, you're the
Well, you're
expert.
not, so here's the good news. You're not taking an action on this decision tonight. You're giving me talking points, and this is very helpful. I see some folks who very strongly feel one way and some folks who feel a little bit that way. So that's probably all I need to know for the moment, when the conversation comes up. All right, shall we?
Yeah.
So background checks, due diligence, we're not going to make a decision about, this is the investigative report that I'm going to encourage you to strongly consider for your finalists. So what I'll want to do is, I don't think we need to make a decision. I'm assuming you want that. Is there anybody that doesn't want that?
No. I want
There
that.
are two, the thing that is a decision, and I don't think you need to make it tonight, is there's a more comprehensive and a less comprehensive. And the significant difference between the two is whether you're going to do a news media search in addition to the investigative background check. And that adds a few $100s to an already pricey item. So just, what I think is best is that we do this once you've identified your finalists to make a decision, because that might sway, you're obviously going to do the same report for each candidate.
Right.
But you might have more of a sense like, we don't need to do the news stories, or yes, we probably should do the news stories. So I want to just put that out there right now to think about, and we'll come back to that at a later point in the process.
I can do it.
Yeah.
And
there's-
some
I'm
people
real
want to do
good
their
at
own. I mean, you could. We're at the final item. So what have I left out? What are you wondering? What do you want me to know? What are you excited about? What are you worried about? This is your turn, board.
So we're gonna see you tomorrow to get one-on-one.
We are, and I believe
Okay.
there's a room
I
right
think
here
I'll
in
just
this
wait till-
office.
Yeah, it'll be in the Howler room downstairs.
Howler room? Okay. Are we gonna
Coffee
meet for
machine or
agenda
something,
after
Yep.
that?
Nope, there, we
doing
have
agenda
a
after
cafe
that?
right next door.
Yeah, are we?
That's what he said.
Okay, that works for me.
And I think, you're my first one, I
don't
think,
know
at
about
10:15?
Marty.
Okay. Look forward to it, thank you.
No, yeah, I think Sandy's right. I'll probably just talk your ear off about things tomorrow that I'm super excited about. I mean, I just think that this opening could just be a godsend for some people. I mean, that you could live in this, I mean, seriously,
place on the
with
face of the
three,
earth.
the groundwork that Marty's laid for having three new buildings open. I mean, really, it's just, I can't imagine why this would be at the top of people's list, really. So I'm excited about the whole thing, except one part of it. He's not budging. Trust me, I've tried. On the whole, retiring.
No.
I do have his number, and when the recruitment window opens,
He's not even making eye contact, so, all right. It's not happening.
anything else?
Not for me.
No, I think we're gonna be spending a lot of time together over the next couple months.
Mhm.
So,
Thank you for being with us
I'm
tonight.
so honored that I have this opportunity. Thank
Appreciate you.
for putting your trust in us.
Just goes to
we'll have to do
case.
an exit interview when he's done.
Yeah.
All right, so anybody have anything further for the good of the order? No? All right.
Thank you, Sarah.
Our board meeting, which was just a work session, is adjourned, which we didn't really have to bring in.
Mine is
for.
at 11.
I think that sounds right.